Missions and the Bell Baptist Association, our association. And I'm not going to say anything about it because he's going to tell us all about it. So that's what he's here to do. Last week was the week of prayer for our association, and so we talked about it. So we're going to learn about it today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share. And I'm going to set this right here where George won't have to use as a napkin.
Okay.
Well, folks, I appreciate the opportunity. Cody, thank you. We have not made a big deal of our association week for we should do, but I was tied up with some other things and did. But I want to take you through just a little bit, first of all, scripture, Galatians chapter 6, because anything we do, we want to make sure that we have the Word guiding us in that, because otherwise we get off on some things that aren't good, and that's not where we want to be. But in Galatians chapter 6, Paul is talking to the church at Galatia, and he's referencing a situation where there's some folks that, how do you handle someone who has been overtaken in a trespass or a sin? But in the midst of that, he uses two illustrations that I think help us understand our responsibility as individuals and responsibility as people working together. And first one, he says, brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Now here's the first one. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind. Number 3, for if anyone thinks himself to be something, when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not another. For each one shall bear his own load. So what's the difference in each one bearing his own load and bearing one another's burdens? Well, the idea here is there's an individual responsibility, but there's also group responsibility. So individual responsibility is the things that God has told me to do that I need to be the one to make sure that my relationship with the Lord is right every day. I need to make sure that I'm where I am with Him and not anything standing between me and the Lord. I have a responsibility to take care of my family. I have a responsibility to be a good citizen of this nation. I have certain responsibilities that nobody else can do for me. I have to do it for myself. But, verse 2, bear one another's burdens. Now the words in the Greek here, verse 5, is kind of like the idea of a backpack. You can carry, when I was going to see my folks, I had a backpack I took on the plane with me, and I didn't ask the stewardess to carry that backpack. She wouldn't have, you know, thought it was a bomb or something. So I had to pick up that backpack and keep up with it if I wanted to get to Florida with it. But then in number 2, bear one another's burdens. Think of that like a big rock that no one person can lift, but if everybody gets around it together, we can lift it because we're cooperating together. And see, in Baptist life, we have a very strong principle of the individual accountability before God. We have the idea of the autonomous local church, and if we're not careful, we get so independent that we don't work together. But we also have the responsibility to reach the world for Christ. And how in the world am I going to do that? I can't do it, but I tell you what, together we can. So there are those large things like evangelism, those large things like starting new churches, those large things like helping to start and maintain a ministry and that sort of thing. That can't be done by 1 or 2 people. It takes everybody working together. So here in Galatians we see the individual responsibility we all have to be faithful, but then the group responsibility we have to do what we can't do by ourselves. I was helping Mom and Dad this past week, and they happened to have a cat to come up, and so I took some cat food on a piece of paper plate, put it out on the porch. Come back the next day, the cat didn't eat much of it. But what I did find out was, from the corner of the porch, it's an outdoor porch, there were this 2 or 3 rows, it looked like I-14 out here, about 4 lanes of traffic, little tiny ants. And they run up on that plate, and they were taking something, and they were running back. There was a northbound and southbound. They were coming and getting it, taking it home, you know. And before that day was over, that plate was clean. It wasn't just cleared, it was clean. I mean, they got every crumb because there was an ant right behind to pick it up. And they got it, took it back, and put it in their nest. That's the thing about togetherness, together. So on this sheet here, Tom Biles wrote this. Back in 2007, we had the 300th anniversary of associations. Now, does anybody know when the Southern Baptist Convention started? tax you on your college work there. 1845.
Wow.
20 years before the Civil War, there was I don't know all the names of it, but there was a fella in the southern states that wanted to be a missionary, and his church approved it, and it went through the state convention, went to the International Mission Board, back then the Foreign Mission Board, and turned him down because he owned slaves. And that was one of those things that precipitated this whole thing in denominational life of the split between the Southern Baptists and the National Baptists. So what we had then was that, so that's about 150, 170 years, right? So anybody got there when the first state convention, because we have the national convention, we have state conventions. In the 50 states, we have 38 state conventions, like the Baptist General Convention of Texas, there's the Baptist Convention of Virginia, the Tennessee Baptist Convention. You know how many of those are in the 50 states? Trick question. There's 38 of them. Oh, we're 50 states. Well, all of New England is the New England Baptist Convention, okay? And some of these areas that Baptists got to kind of late, what we call New Work states, like Wyoming and Utah are one convention. Minnesota, Wisconsin are one state convention, so it's 38 instead of 50. So, but they started back in the, somewhere around 1812, 1814 was the first Baptist Association in America. Now, that's getting on up to 200 years. But guess how long associations have been around?
You just said associations.
I meant state convention.
Okay.
State convention, thank you. That's what she keeps me, focused. You guys are too polite, she doesn't mind just telling me. We first got married, I'd make mistakes, and she'd sit me down and explain things. She'd explain. After 42 years, she'd just look at me, okay, what did I do wrong? Just to look. But associations, guess when the first association was formed?
1707.
And whereabouts?
Philadelphia?
It's, all right, you scored, man, you scored. But think about it, the National Convention, 170 years old, State Convention started about 200 years ago, but the associations have been around for 300 and whatever, 14 years. Why? Because Baptists realized they were independent churches, scattered out all over the country, and they realized there was a lot of needs around. There were orphans that weren't being fed. There were different groups of people, the Native Americans, the African Americans, over toward the West Coast, the Chinese, the Asian people weren't being reached. They wanted to start missions for them, but no one church was large enough to take care of it. You know, the average Baptist church today runs around 100 people. That's the average. Now you take that and compare that to First Baptist Dallas or Birchman Avenue in Fort Worth, or First Baptist Temple, or First Baptist Belton. The average of our 45,000 churches in the SBC is right around 100 members. And so it's a small one, but they couldn't do it, so they said, let's work together. And the first way they worked together was in associations. Okay? So that's how we got to that's kind of what we're talking about here. There are about 109 associations in Texas. And they assist churches in starting, developing, growing, and by extending the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now again, the key thing is, like, we have 7 mission starts right now, okay? The association didn't start a single one of them. Churches start churches, but churches will get others to help them start churches so we can do it together. But keep in mind, my job is not to start churches, but it is to encourage folks to consider, would you be willing to be a part of that? Now, one other thing I want to bring up before we leave this, and that is that back in 1925, Baptists were in a dilemma. Southern Baptist Convention almost went bankrupt because we just had a lot of money going out. There was an economic downturn, and all of the 20s, we were really not meeting our needs. So they said, we've got to come up with a way, because churches would send whatever. And what they would do, Brother Cody here's pastor, he would get phone calls. Pastor, I'm with a children's home. Can I speak to your congregation some Sunday? Well, okay, I'll put you down. Well, Pastor, I'm from the hospital. Can I come speak? Okay, I'll put you down. Pastor, I'm from that. Before long, Cody never preached because he had all these speakers coming in, okay? And it was just everybody. And usually in that situation, the children's home usually got most of the money, because who can't help children, you know what I'm saying? So what they did is they developed in 1925 the cooperative program. And what that means is that all the churches put a percentage of money that they choose to put in, and nobody tells them what to do. And they put that into a pot, if you will. And in that pot, the money that Dyess Grove gives, it goes from your treasurer. Is it Landon? You write the checks? Or
Larry.
Larry writes a check. Whatever you're going to give, it goes to the state convention. And then the state convention keeps a part of that, and then they send the rest on to Southern Baptist Convention. All the money that goes to Southern Baptist Convention through these gifts, this is called a cooperative program, working together. And from that time till now, things have worked out well. We also have 3 special offerings every year: Lottie Moon at Christmas, Annie Armstrong during the Easter time of year, and then Mary Hill Davis is the state offering that we do around the fall of the year. And so in the Foreign Mission, or the International Mission Board, the money that gets to Nashville, half of it goes to foreign missions. 25% of it goes to the North American Mission Board, which handles the U.S. and Canada. So most of the money is sent out to areas to help directly. When you give to Lottie Moon, every bit of that goes to the International Mission Board. All the Annie Armstrong goes to the North American Mission Board, and then Mary Hill Davis goes to work here in Texas. Matter of fact, I just got a note today on my computer that we made some applications for grants to help us with some projects, and that came out of the Mary Hill Davis Fund. So when that fund's down low, our grants are cut by a certain percentage. When it's in, we get it. So that's a blessing to us. It kind of comes back to us, if you will. But what's interesting about the cooperative program is they never had a place for associations. We as an association get no money from the cooperative program. Now, I'm not complaining. I think when they did the thing in 25, the associations are the closest entities to the local church, and generally the churches take care of that. So when you give your money that you're going to put into missions, Larry sends 2 checks. One check goes to the state, and then that goes to the national, Florida does, and then he sends us a check. So that's how we're funded. We're not in that method except for a few grants we get from the state convention. We're not in that flow, so we have to keep reminding people that we're not part of the cooperative program. We support it, but we're not a part of it. So that's just an update for those. So I wanted at the bottom there, I want to share with you just a brief history of Bell Baptist Association. Bell Baptist Association began in 1874. Lana was just a wee lass at that point. And it's called the Salado Baptist Association. If you've ever been, she's a friend. If you've ever been on the road 95 that goes from Temple down to Holland, if you've been on that road, yes. What is that sign? There's a couple of trailers there and a couple of houses or two, and there's a sign that says Sparks. Mm-hmm. I thought, look out, there's fireflies, or I'm not sure what that was all about. Come to find out, that's the community of Sparks. And back about 50 years ago, there was a church there, Sparks Baptist Church. Had a dear friend who retired, he's passed away now, Floyd Richards. He pastored Sparks Baptist Church. You can go back to our old associational records. If you picked up the record, we've got them back down into the early 1900s. And there's a whole list of churches that we don't have anymore. Spring Branch Baptist Church, I think Durango had a Baptist church at one time. But the farming communities, when the farmers moved to the city and they gathered all the farms up, there wasn't as many families. County line, Dyess Grove, at one time when Bill Ray Palmer was your pastor, they ran over 100 people there. But it was all the small family farms, you know, that the people came, the kids came to Sunday school. We're seeing a resurgence there because now folks are raising their kids and are moving out and buying a few acres and building houses and stuff, but it's a different dynamic. So anyway, it was changed, the name was to the Bell Baptist Association about 1923. It became Bell Williamson area about 1965, and then once again became Bell Baptist in 1979. So the name has kind of revolved around a little bit, but we've been in existence, again, for about 150 years. We're coming up, it's 147th year, we're coming up on our sesquicentennial, which is 150th anniversary. Since 1950, Bell Baptist Association has had 6 directors of mission. Now, the interesting part about that is all of them but one have passed away. This job will kill you. I'm just saying, you got to be careful there. Even my predecessor, he went out and his son, he was trimming limbs on his son's tree down around Round Rock somewhere and had a heart attack. So I told my son I'm not cutting any of his trees at all. Currently, Bell Baptist has 77 churches and missions, which we're very grateful for. So I was praying, the Lord gave me an insight to help me clarify my role as a director of missions. That's a strange title, so what do you do? So my daughter Stacy joked the other day about my job. She said, Dad, I just figured out how to describe to my friends what you do as a pastor. Now that you've changed jobs, what do I tell them that you do? So I mulled that over. And as I thought, way to communicate with churches, I said, here I am. I'm a missionary helping churches fulfill the Great Commission. I'm a minister helping our churches fulfill the great commandment to care, and I'm a mentor helping our churches fulfill the great commitment to grow. So that's why I see myself in terms of leading the association. And what I want to do is to look at the PowerPoint. This was done by a friend of mine, Stephen Parks. He's retired doing now, but he put this together. And as Sue, as Vanna will turn the vowels over, this was a little moniker they used, 1707 to 2007. And then from the time of the founding of the First Baptist Church in America in Providence, Rhode Island by Roger Williams, until 1707, churches were the only Baptist organization. You ever heard anybody say that I just don't want to be a part of organized religion? You know, you can say, well, I agree, and I'm not, I'm a Baptist. We're pretty autonomous. Anyway, but until 1707, basically, the church was the primary, and still is. The Welch Tract Church, one of the original 5 churches forming the First Baptist Association in America, and that's the church building. It's still there today, I understand, and they're in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Association, formed by 5 churches in 1707, set the precedent for all future Baptist organizations, the first entity in Baptist life other than the local church. So the purposes in the 1700 doctrinal monitors to make sure they were, you know, an understanding of what Scripture was interpreted as, advise on Baptist practices, help find suitable pastors, promote benevolent educational work, provide fellowship, provide preaching and ministry models, and active in religious freedom issues. It was a Baptist, Isaac Backus, that told the original Constitutional Convention group, when they wrote the Constitution, what do you think? He said, there's no religious freedom in here. They went back and they put in the Bill of Rights, which talks about guaranteed freedom of religion. That's one of the first, that document, Bill of Rights, are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution of the U.S. And one of them was a Baptist, Isaac Backus. The secret of Baptist phenomenon go back to 1800 was the Baptist associations, many of which were de facto missionary agencies. Okay.
What does that mean?
De facto missionary agents, in other words, they were basically interested in helping the churches be on mission and go out and start churches and move out to minister to the Native Americans, minister to the Hispanics. Okay. So it was the association pushing that wagon down the road. William Carey in 1792 started the modern mission movement. And it's interesting, the next slide will show you that the role of the association was that of mission support and sending wherever God was leading people to go and minister. And then Carey, another association of pastors, started the first missionary society. He stood up at an associational meeting and said, brothers, and he was a cobbler by trade, and he would cobble shoes, had a map of the world by his workbench, and as he was cobbling shoes, he'd be praying for different countries that the gospel would go out to those. And so he was there. So with the association, he said, brothers, we've got to do something about the lost. And to which one of the older brothers said, young man, sit down. When God wants to do something about the lost, he'll do it without your or my help. There was a real strong Calvinistic bent in some of the early churches, and they just, knew God would do it in his time. But Carey said, no, God has called us to go, and he organized this missionary society that sent him to India. Missionary societies multiplied. In 1814, Baptist America formed a foreign mission society, which eventually evolved in the Southern Baptist Convention. So you had the association model and the society model. In the association, it was basically geographically based. For the society, it was financially based. And the association had multiple ministries, but the society had a single focus in ministry. For instance, they had a thing called the American Bible Society, a mission society like China Inland Missions. These were all specific areas where they would be sending missionaries. So they would come in, like I mentioned earlier, and they would make an appeal to the pastor, can I speak to your congregation about my ministry, and ask them for support. The third thing, the association is composed of churches and ministry by members. The society is composed of individuals and ministry by anyone. Anybody could, it's kind of like the Gideons. They're not a church, and a church doesn't support them. It's just individuals. That's more of a society model. There's not good or bad. It's just two different ways of going about it. The fourth one on the left, they had emphasis on cooperation. In the society, there was no need for cooperation. It just went out and they got enough money to do what they needed to do. And in the last one, the church association, there's a role tension there about the association of church are still trying to move forward. They're just trying to move together. Whereas the society was disconnected from churches. I mean, they didn't need churches. They could get rich philanthropists to give them money to go minister to whatever they were doing. So we moved away from a society to a more associational model, more of a family, if you will. So the Organization of Baptists, 1707 and 1814 was basically associations. And then, the First State Convention was formed by associations in 1821 in Columbia, South Carolina. So it's First State Convention. Southern Baptists began the trend of more centralization that's continued to the present time. The reason for that is, if you can have a state convention and under its auspices you can cut down administration costs, your overhead's a lot lower. You know how it is if you have a bunch of things out here and they all got to have leaders, but if you pull that all together, you can eliminate some of the duplication. Organization of Baptists from 1840 to 45, associations, state conventions, and missionary societies. And then, and the SBC was formed, as I mentioned earlier, in 1845 in Augusta, Georgia. And then organizations of Southern Baptist, 1845 to present, we have associations, state conventions, the Southern Baptist Convention, and all follow an associational organization pattern. We don't get involved as a denomination with societies per se. They're all part of what we're doing in terms of cooperation, built on the church, usually working through associations and then state conventions. The cooperative program established in 1920 did not include associations. Gradually, associations became dependent on state conventions and the SBC. Consequently, they became a primary supporter of their program. It's almost like it would start at SBC, go to state conventions, and go down to association to the churches. And that made for continuity. If you drove across the country in like 1960, and you started in South Carolina, and you drove a straight line all the way through Georgia and Alabama, Mississippi, and you kept going through Louisiana and on to Texas and on out to California, you'd be having the same curriculum. You had one or two options for adult curriculum at Sunday school. You'd go into a worship service and you'd be singing out of the same book, the Broadman hymnal. You would have the same kind of record cards. You had the same tote boards with all the numbers. I mean, it was like carbon copy churches all across the thing, because it was one convention, it was one state convention, and it was just moving on down the line. Now, that's good to have, you know, a homogenization of things, you know, lookalike, but it wasn't good in some other areas. So let's look and see how it's changed. Associations gained recognition and importance through the increased national convocations. There was one at Gulf Shore at 63 and Ridgecrest at 74. The DOM was recognized as a full member of the SBC mission family. And there was a new focus on associations serving churches and less on promotion of state and national programs. Used to, the joke was, if you couldn't preach anymore, you went and became a DOM because you don't have to preach, you know. And I had one guy tell me to my face at Moffitt, he said, well, I didn't know DOMs could preach. I said, well, sit down and you'll find out. Yeah, but the point is, you know, but it's like he's on his way out, so we're just going to help him until he can retire, and he's just going to be a mouthpiece for the denomination. That's not what we do. We're missionaries too. So that began to change slowly but surely, and we see some of the reason here. So recent science point to more decentralization. You know, modern technology, education, and transportation are shrinking the world. The IMB has adopted a people group model, and some associations send out their own full-time missionaries. Ellis Association, just up the road in Waxahachie, is reaching the Lenca Indians of Honduras, and they support a missionary fully on the field. Now the thing is, what's happening is people are going to realize that it's good to have this organization, but if God leads you to do something unique, like for instance, we've had some people, Ron Winsman, who used to be at Bartlett and also Taylor's Valley, Ron's daughter and son-in-law wanted to do an orphanage. They were IB missionaries to Zambia, and they wanted to do an orphanage. And I just said, we don't do orphanages, so we did. So they resigned from that, came back, got support, had churches that supported them, association, and they went back and for several years were in an orphanage ministry. But that's what God laid on their heart, and they're going out and getting support. So the association helps churches find out what God wants done and then help them do that. And one of the things we do with that is experiencing God. That's one of our studies we use to help churches. If you guys want to do experiencing God weekend, we could do that, but it's actually how do you know and do the will of God? And that's a very primary point. You know, we have a whole team that comes to church and does that at no cost to the church. It's kind of like a revival in a way, but it's very helpful for many churches. So we've seen with the COVID thing that, you know, the technology is now we reach people and do a good job of that. Jimmy Draper, who used to be at First Baptist Euless, and then went on to become the director of Lifeway Resources, or Baptist Bookstore at one time, compares the association to stand of redwood trees. You know, redwood trees don't have a taproot per se, like an old pine tree or oak tree does. They have roots that go out kind of like cypress do, and these are interlocked. And because they're interlocked, they hold each other up, which is really cool, that interdependency. And then he asked us to learn these lessons. We need one another. Associations call out churches and individuals to mission. I like to use the term calling the call. Only God can call somebody, but it's up to us to help call the call. And then associations set the pattern, how we do work and encourage folks. So in the past 3 centuries, Baptist Association has been the most effective entity for doctrinal accountability, ongoing mutual fellowship, local mission and ministry efforts, communication among churches, and assisting local churches. And that talks about a book, and I won't leave it with that. I want to share with you a brochure. We just did this new, and we just had a self-study, and a guy led us through that. And these are our new brochures that came. Kathy put these and organized these for us. And this right here tells you the real essence of what we're about and what we're working on. We're still working out a few bugs in it, but basically, notice on the front page you have a lot of different, it's one thing they're all doing, but they're doing it in a lot of different ways. And that is baptism. Notice that we got some that are in a horse trough, got some that are in an institutional baptistry. We've got a Chinese pastor baptizing son of person belted. Dave Jeffries is there at Summer Fun at Vista Church, baptizing out at Summer Fun. They rent the whole park for a Sunday afternoon, and they baptize out there. You got the motorcycle church with the big cross, that's our biker church. They baptize in a horse trough out on the new build site they've got. But as you open it up, you just see a lot of different ministry pictures from our churches they turn in. And here are the 4 things that we believe God's called us to do. And that is we are to care, to encourage and support churches to be healthier together. Connecting, connects the churches together to communities they serve. Equipping, providing resourcing and training to help churches achieve their kingdom objectives. And committed evangelism and missional engagement through the churches to the ends of the earth. Brother Cody and I are going Saturday morning, if it still work out with his schedule, and we're going to go down to Leander, their church we have there at the Crystal Lake Baptist Church, and we're going to do a training there along with Brother Will Passmore, and we're going to learn about how to do all the organizational pieces for revival. Well, how that came about, we have a thing called Reap Revival, and you guys have done it several years now, and so, but Crystal Lake has never done one. So Crystal Lake wanted to do that, so well, let's bring in the evangelist, he'll teach you, because we did that training one time, Landon and I went down the street, we're going to do that in Leander Saturday, and then, so Cody will be able to tell Daniel Patrick, who is the pastor there, about his experience, and Paul can reference that. So it's just really cool how we can get together, encourage one another, and support one another. And if you guys want to take the hike when they have their meeting, you can go down there as a group and support them in that. It'd be something to be really surprising because they're on the far south part of our association, but they're a Bible church there. And then we got all the folks there, and we help with the Baptist student ministry and those kind of things. I got a little thing on the back there. But the bottom line is that we are about reaching people and touching lives through the churches. That's a critical piece. We don't start missions, we don't do things without the church being a central focus of that. If the churches don't want to do it, we're not going to do it. This is something that we kind of partner with others on that you may, Lena probably has seen this. but, you know, you might want to do some things, and these are ministries that are happening, and we're, like, for instance, what do you do with your old Sunday school literature? You know, people say, well, what happened was, you know, people said, we got the Sunday school literature, it's only been used once, and, you know, are there places around the world that might be able to use it? I mean, overseas, they don't care what the date is, it's just good literature. So what we're doing is, we met a man over in East Texas, and every so often I gather a bunch of boxes of this stuff, and I'll take it over to him, and he takes it over to Georgia, and there's a group there that buys these big old shipping, rents them, and packs them full of literature, closes the door on them, and ships them overseas, and then they're distributed to people that can't afford that kind of thing, but it's better than going in a landfill. And so that's just one of the things, like all used books, especially Christian, these go to the prison ministry. Christian family-based magazines are taken to chaplain ministry at Metro Hospital in Killeen and McLean's Children's. Bible study, Leader Kids DVDs, these go to different area churches. Aluminum cans, Ted knows in, they pick them up, and it goes to Haiti, Hope for the Hungry. Blankets, coats, toiletries, socks, bags, backpacks, local homeless ministries and Christian Farms Treehouse Ministry. Yarn, crochet hook, and knitting needles to make hats and scarves for Hope Pregnancy. VBS materials, kits, and decorations. We get that and take it on mission trips. And eyeglasses go to the Lions Club. But again, it's just a way of recycling, I guess you'd say, the things and getting. But we help facilitate that. We don't make it work. We just help facilitate it. The building we meet in, many of you have been in it. That's your building. That's your building. And I work for you. I don't tell you what to do. You tell me what you want to do, and I'll tell you if we can do it or not. And then the last thing I want to close with, we'll have some questions, but I wanted to, since this is kind of prayer meeting too, we have a prayer guide for the association, and we covet your prayers. And this is a listing of all the pastors in our churches, and I can get you, if you want the rest of the staff member, we just put the pastor in, and we also have indicated here churches that are without pastors, they have a little asterisk by it, and also we've indicated our new mission starts, because they definitely need our prayers. And if y'all will share about this, that would be great.
Here, you can have mine.
But as you open that up and look, make sure Cody spelled his name, we spelled his name right. But you know, we put that in there so you can be praying. And think about all of these churches are focused on the same thing that you guys are focused on. And that is, how can we reach people in our area? Acts 1:8 says that we go into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. And through the cooperation we have an opportunity locally. We have a partnership with Wisconsin. Just got back from Wisconsin a couple weeks ago, and we did an experiencing a weekend up there in central Wisconsin with 4 churches. And we took the team and we paid for everything. The church wasn't out anything except to feed us while we're there and house us. And it was just a wonderful time for them to get that. And then we went up back during COVID when it was really bad. We took 4 automobiles up there. They've got a missionary that's working with the Chippewa Native American people. And that individual, I said, what do you need? He said, we need cars. I said, for what? He said, well, there's not much public transportation up here. These folks, when they get out of rehab and things like that, they got to have a job, and they can't get a job without a car. So we took them 4 cars, and they have a guy there who's a mechanic. He was the first baptism of that mission. And Ricky is his name, and he'll probably be their pastor because the missionary is training him for that. And he got 3 of those cars running, and now people are using them up there. So I've got 2 cars already promised, a little Ford Ranger pickup and a Honda Civic with a blown motor. We got to get the VIN number for Saturday. Remind me to tell Paul, give me that VIN number, and we're going to go to the Snyder Salvage down in Holland, and Mr. Snyder has halfway promised to get us a motor that'll go in there. So we're going to ship the car and the motor and let them fix it, you know. But again, drive it up there. So these are just projects we do and things we get involved in that you're a part of. You're a part of, and we're so excited and would like to get folks involved. In 2022, we're tentatively planning another trip to Indonesia. I went over there in 17, I think it was, and stayed over there about 10, 11 days. It takes 2 days to get over there, 2 days to get back. Go halfway around the world. And matter of fact, I could stand one day and look down, and I could see Texas all the way down there. Just kidding. But So we're going back. I went to a college there. We got a lady that goes as a nurse, and she teaches in the nursing school at this college. Then all the kids got in, and we got books in their language. And I did experiencing God teaching through an interpreter, and we had like 300 of those students out of about 700 pray to receive Christ. And now the school has gotten to be about 2,500, and they're wanting people to come and help us with that and to teach English as well as nursing. So we got a nursing student out of TC that's talking about going. Judy will be going again, and I'm trying to get the professor of engineering at Mary to go because they've got some issues on a ranch where they're trying to pump water and some other things that people can help them with, and do a mission trip as well as what their main deal is. So it's exciting. We went to, where else did we go? We went to Tanzania 2 years ago, and the biker church sent the money to buy a motorcycle over there, not a Harley, a little scooter, and this guy got it, and we rode it. Actually, he's taking it around a mountain up there where a big Muslim village is, and he's preaching the gospel on that motorcycle. So it's just exciting. Memorial and the biker church partnered together to provide 3 motorcycles actually to guys there that just need a bike to go places further and faster.
Okay.
Well, I didn't want to rush to it, just add questions, and I'm gonna turn it over to Brother Cody or Brother, you can do music on, but tell me what, questions or anybody has, anything leads that. And we have a deal, it's a year program, and people come in, say they want to be church, but also others come in. It's good training. And we teach them, how to preach. I led a seminar, a week-long seminar at the beginning of this one, how to preach. I'll be leading a session here in a couple of weeks about how to do pastoral care. How do you do a hospital visit? How do you do a sick call? Premarital counseling, those kind of things pastors do. And I'll be leading out and giving some resources to help with that. Whenever I teach this course, especially, I do a section on funerals. I give every one of those guys a copy of a sermon that I have preached, and there's four sermons I give them. First is a sermon for an aged saint that's passed away. Everybody definitely knew the Lord, and that's a wonderful service to be a part of when it's a homegoing. But the second one is a person who never made a profession of faith. Now, we're not judging them. If they're not a Christian, how do you do a funeral and stay true to the scripture, but not beat up on the person who's died? So how do you do that? I got a sermon to help with that. We've got one for the death of a child, a small baby. How do you process that? And then the fourth one, which is really scary, is a suicide. If you've never done anything with that, how do you go out doing a message for suicide? So these are 4 areas that I'm sure all of our guys at least have a copy of one that they can make their own, with just the points and things to help. So we're about preparing people for ministry and helping them be effective. And that church planning center / leader trainer is free to anybody. We don't charge anybody for it, and you're welcome to come. And you can help us with that by praying for them, recommending people to come, and then it may be that when they're ready and they are church planters, you may want to help support them as they start their new church. So
how would somebody find out information about the church planting center and the courses and things that are offered?
it's supposed to be on the website.
Okay.
So we need to check on that, but that's our primary way. We have some brochures and stuff. I didn't bring them, but it's Tuesday night, 6 to 9, and they take several weeks off during the course of the year because holidays and stuff, but pretty much it's about 43 out of 52 weeks we're up there, or Carl is.
To me, to relive
That's good, George.
different things that were such a blessing to me in my growing up days. And I thank you for all of your.
Thank you for
2
sharing.
Corinthians 5:20, we're ambassadors for
Yeah.
Christ. That was our motto.
Yeah. Great organization.
All right, Janet, you want
Without him I could do nothing. Without him I truly fail. Without him I would be drifting. 448, just a closer walk with thee. All 3 verses. I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as one. As I walk, let me walk close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but thee, dear Lord, none but thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. When my feeble life is old, time for me will be no more. Guide me gently, safely home to thy kingdom shore, to thy shore. Just